Welcome to 50 Shades of Shilamida with your hostess, Shilamida. Today I want to talk about past life regressions. So the first thing that we have to wrap ourselves around is that we have lived this life before. So I know for a lot of you that might be a hard concept, but if you can open yourself up to it, I'm going to share some really fun stories with you today. The very first time that I did a past life regression was 12 years ago, almost, coming up. And I was at a Mind, Body, Spirit Expo, and it was a group regression. And in that regression, the person that was hosting it told us to go into a meditation. I went into a meditation, and it takes you back to a past life. So I had seen the life. It looked like it was Little House on the Prairie, and I happened to be a young man. I was blonde. I maybe was 18 years old max. And there was a wedding. In the corner there was a house, and my great-grandmother was there. She had already passed on, and it was my wedding day. And so on my wedding day, as the wedding started, my wife-to-be was walking towards me, and she got shot. And I was so horrified in that moment, and I am now sobbing in a room full of people. I have no idea what's going around me. I'm just like in this whole meditation that's happening. And I heard the person facilitating it say that we need to forgive whatever it is that we saw, that we need to continue moving on. And so I did. I forgave the moment. I forgave the situation. And when we came to, I was like, wow, that was like such a bizarre thing to go back to. Well, wouldn't you know it, that 2 days later, I met my soulmate. So I truly believe that in that vision, that my husband now was the woman that was walking down that aisle. And because I was able to go back and forgive that entire situation, that I was able to call that love into my life. Now, that wasn't the only time that I did a past life regression. Throughout the years, I've had several of them done, actually. And so a joke that my husband and I have is that he was a woman in a past life, which we saw in that vision, and that he was also a horse in a past life. Just because of the way that he chews and his mannerisms, I always joke around that he was a horse. Well, one day I was in acupuncture school, and I was in the library. I was having a really hard time studying. And there was a girl there with me, and I was like, oh, I'm just having like a really hard time studying. And she said to me, I don't normally do this, but one of your past lives are coming through right now. Do you think that I could read you? So I was like, okay, sure. And she's like, you're a little girl, and you're on like an Indian reservation, and your family is this, I forget what she said, and she said, and there's a horse there with you. And so, of course, I went home and I told my husband, I knew it. I knew that you were a horse in a past life. That must have been you, because I truly believe that he is my soulmate and that we've lived this life before. So maybe there's people in your life right now that you just feel like this soul connection to, or you meet a new person and you're like, oh my God, I feel like I've known you forever, right? And we have like these relationships with people. Or on the flip side, you might have like really tumultuous relationships with people, and you really don't understand like why this is happening, like why you can't find a common ground with someone. It's because we live life after life, and we come back in order to make corrections for the things that we've done or things that have been done to us in past lives. So fast forward a few years later, I'm at a bridal shower. And after the bridal shower, my girlfriend calls me, who is getting married, and she said, did you meet my friend Josephine at the bridal shower? I said, no, I don't think so. She said, well, Josephine was like reading you the entire time you were there. She said that your energy was so strong and that she really would like to connect with you. And I was like, okay. So she connected us together, and we didn't connect before the wedding. The wedding happened to be in Turks and Caicos. So interestingly enough, before I went to Turks and Caicos, I had ruptured my eardrum, and I wasn't able to go swimming on that trip. And one of the days of the trip, we took a boat trip, and there were 2 boats. And so my husband and I got onto the one boat, and it was kind of full with kids and whatever. We didn't have our kids there. And so we were like, no problem, we'll go on the other boat. So we get on the other boat. And everybody got off the boat at some point to go swimming, and it was me, two of my friends, and there was a lady sitting all the way on the other side of the boat. So I turned to one of my friends and I said, "Is that intuitive lady, Josephine?" And as I said that, I hear, "Hi, Shill." So like she knew who I was. So now this woman is approaching me and my two friends get off the boat, and she starts telling me all of these things about my life and how I'm living a life of correction, which is something that I intended to do, and how I only have one more life left until I reach nirvana. And so I didn't even know what that meant at the time, but it sounded really good. So I was like, okay, that sounds great. So she said to me, "I want to take you back to your worst life." So like this initial fear came over me, like, oh my God, like where is she going to take me? And do I really want to see what she's going to show me? And then she says to me, "I'm going to take you back to your worst life so that we can do the correction on it so that you can move on in this life and live out a really happy life." And I was like, okay. So like a week later, I went to her house and she did this past life regression on me. And wouldn't you know it, I went back to the same life where it was my wedding day. And I remember being in the regression, like thinking like, why am I here again? Like I've already seen this. Well, it just so happened that we went further into the vision. After I had seen my wife die on that day, I actually saw who the shooter was. Now, in the first time I went back, once I saw her die was the end of that regression. So when I saw the shooter was my father from this life. And in that moment, I was able to forgive him and love him and all the things because my dad was such a great dad. And so when I came to and we started talking about it, she said the reason why your father lived this life was for that correction. So when I was 17 years old, my father got diagnosed with leukemia and he was given 2 years to live. He ended up living 9 years. So during the time that he was alive, I prayed for him to live, right? Like any daughter would pray for their father to stay alive. But towards the end of his life, I actually changed my prayers because I was super into Kabbalah at the time and I had really found a spiritual footing. And for the first time in my life, I felt like very safe and secure in who I was becoming. And in that moment, I had changed my prayers because I started to realize that we're not all here to live 100 years, right? Like not everybody is meant to live this long life. And so I started praying that he needed to do what he needed to do, that his suffering would end if he was suffering. And the prayers just changed. And when the prayers changed, the whole situation changed. And in the 9 years that my dad ended up living, we called him a cat. He had 9 lives because he literally had like 2 heart attacks, kidney failure, like all of his organs would shut down. And every single time he would live through it. But the last time I was so connected to him, and I decided to stay at the hospital with him, which is something that I had never done before. But I guess like intuitively, I knew that he was going to pass. And we had some of the most beautiful moments in that time that we were together. And I remember at one point he broke down and he started crying. He said, "I watched my father die the same way that you're watching me die." Now it makes me wonder like how many lives we actually lived together. But I realize now that his entire life, his entire incarnation here in this life was to correct that life for me. And he wasn't able to leave this earth plane until I was on my 2 feet. Had he died in the 2 years that they had given him when I was 19 years old, I probably wouldn't be here right now because my life spiraled out of control. I wasn't able to really deal with all of the things, and I would have gone in a completely different direction, and I may not have lived to see this time of my life. So doing past life regressions and doing some of this work is super helpful because we start to understand what it is that we're here for, why we encounter the people that we encounter, why we do the things that we do. And we are able to live this life happier and more free because we're able to do a lot of the healing work. A lot of people are living through suffering that they don't need to be living through. They just don't understand how to heal the suffering because we're just conditioned to live in suffering. And we're not taught things like past lives or Akashic records or, believe in things like psychics and mediums. But there's so much evidence and so many stories that I can tell you that have happened throughout my life that really lead me to believe that these things are true and that they are happening for a reason for this lifetime with us. So this is my little introduction to past life regressions. If you've ever thought about doing one, I highly suggest that you do one. If you've ever been curious, definitely go out and find somebody that can help you. Reach out to me. I can connect you with somebody. And I hope that you live the rest of your life in a state of healing so that you can experience true bliss, happiness. Thank you for joining me today, and I will see you again soon.